After our episode on picking your battles, we heard from several of you, and you're like, this is super helpful, but my main battle at the moment is one I can't walk away from because it's about health, safety, etc. One question in particular really got us talking. A dad wrote in saying one big question for us is how to reduce daytime wedding accidents at school. It seems to happen most during screen time or hyper focus of a preferred activity. We have routine bathroom breaks in our kiddos' IEP, but it still seems to happen quite often, and we're in the third grade. During the after school unmasking time, he'll also refuse to change. He won't wear pull ups due to the rough fabric and embarrassment of wearing a diaper at school. I worry about his growing shame cycles and bullying that will result. First of all, thank you. Thank you for that question and reaching out for support. It's a lot, it's a hard one. And we appreciate you being vulnerable and asking that question.
Yes. And his question really highlights the complexity of all of this. We have this main concern about not using the bathroom during periods of hyper focus, which I actually also see this a lot. I have a lot of clients who struggle with this even into their teenage years. And then we have this whole other kind of set of factors that are happening, which are a little bit more complicated, maybe, where there's this sensory need, there's masking, there's social shame that's all kind of tangled in here and really needs some unpacking to figure out how best to support.
Totally. And I think that piece is so relatable for most parents of neurodivergent kids. We have things we need our kids to do, like take a shower, brush your teeth, go to the bathroom, eat food. And for a complex mix of reasons, many neurodivergent kids really struggle to do one or more of these must do items, and then it becomes a battle.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, so let's dive in. Let's talk about it. How can we support our kids with these must do items, the things that they're struggling with, or maybe even cut them down a little bit if possible? Welcome to Parenting Neurodivergent Humans. I'm Dr. Morgan Beidelman. I am a clinical psychologist, former school psych, former teacher, neurodivergent myself, and parent to two humans, one of whom is neurodivergent.
And I'm Breann Colpitz. I'm a school psychologist turned social coach for twice exceptional kids. I'm a mom to a couple neurodivergent kids and a late realized ADHD human, which means I'm double blessed with autism and ADHD. Thanks for being here. We're so glad you're here. So, how we can think through these things, let's dig into that, understand, support our kids with these must do items. I think the first thing, as you kind of already alluded to, Morgan, is that we have to dig in. There's this problem, and maybe there's some sub problems happening here, like there's the root. We need to understand the reason why doing the hard thing is so hard and then explore what's going on with this. So here's some common ideas for you to marinate on of reasons why this could be a layered situation for you. So the sensory piece of things.
And Breann,
Sometimes
are you suggesting that parents kind of like talk about this with kids and
Oh,
unpack it
good.
together?
Well, I think possibly depending on the age of your kid, depending on what the problem is, but also I think this is like a framework for parents to use when they're thinking through trying to solve one of these battles they can't put down. This could end up being a conversation with your kid, but that depends on your kid. Like we always say, there's no just one way of doing things. There's no prescription for these things, but I think as parents, we have to think deeper. So, yeah, the first kind of realm is the sensory ick. Like, is it a sensory thing? And it's so hard because they just can't stand it. Could it be executive functioning? Doing the hard thing involves too many steps. It's too complicated. So their brain is just avoiding it because they just can't do it, or like the initiation is too much. Maybe it's a social factor. Kids are worried about what other kids will think if they see them ask for help, if they see them do something that's different than what everyone else is doing. Is there a social piece? Is it a personal feeling around being embarrassed, being afraid to fail, feeling ashamed, having personal feelings that make moving forward or getting through this battle more difficult? Or maybe it's just not interesting. It's hard to remember and it's just not fun.
Mhm.
Welcome to life, kids.
Yeah. I think it could be any of those things. Oftentimes, it's going to be a combination of those things.
Right.
I think the sensory one is, to me, sometimes the hardest because there's so many aspects of sensory. It could be sensory because of tactile, like the way something feels. It could be sensory because of noise. It could be sensory because of smells, right? There's so many aspects of it. And sometimes people don't know the sensory experience they're having. They're just not liking how something feels. And so I think if they're saying something like that, like, I don't really like the way it feels, or something kind of generic like that, I would try and unpack that a little bit more with them, because there could be a sensory piece there that they don't maybe have language for yet.
That's a really good point. We were just talking about how socks feel this morning on the ride to school, and that's something that I need to dig in deeper in my own home around. Raise your hand if you could relate. The whole socks being a thing where it's like, I hate how my shoes feel. So like, getting out the door can be a challenge because it's, oh, we got the socks issue and then the socks in the shoe issue. And then, like if they get, anyway, I don't know, the whole socks thing, you might get me on that one. But another piece is adjusting the environment. Can we adjust the environment? So for this, can we just not wear socks?
Mhm.
Can we eliminate that? Maybe we got to change the lighting. I'm also a fan of the no big light. If you know, you know. Add something that smells good. Use shower steamers. I realize we're getting general here, thinking about this dad's question, but then like zooming out to figure out how can we make this applicable to all of our audience, right? And so figuring out how to make small tweaks or adjustment in the environment.
And I think about adjusting environment. I also like to think about a couple of like sub strategies for this. Like we're talking about steamers and things like that that
Yep.
can be enjoyable. Jessica McCabe on her channel How to ADHD talks about looking for, and I think this could be applicable for many neurodivergent profiles, ways to infuse novelty, urgency, or special interest. And those are really nice potential environmental changes. So for example, I have a kid who really struggles with showering, and we play the Hamilton soundtrack during shower time as a way to pair that with something that they do really enjoy. And that has helped facilitate showering in that household. I have another person, they were taking medication just fine. And then suddenly water was boring. And so we got electrolyte packs, like a variety pack. And so every day there's a different flavor that's now put in the water to help facilitate taking meds. So those are some good ways to think through environmental changes. Like, can we infuse novelty? Can we infuse a special interest? Or can we tighten and make it a little bit more urgent? Because what happens for people is they'll replay it over and over and over again rather than just engaging in the behavior. So they'll
Right.
rumination prior to activation. If we shorten the timeline for activation, that can sometimes help.
I love that. Basically, how can we make this less terrible?
Yeah.
Right. So, specifically thinking about the question that kind of got us launched on this specific episode, for this particular kiddo, can they use a bathroom that's a single stall instead of going into the big bathroom at school where you never know? It's the Wild West in there. You never know what you're going to walk into. So, is there a different bathroom? Maybe it's the adult bathroom, but could this kiddo use that bathroom because it meets their sensory needs and environmental needs? That's a question I'd want to explore.
Yes. It also makes me think, going back to the sensory piece, can we provide, and this is more of an accommodation, where instead of him wearing like regular underwear or wearing a diaper, is there some medium, some middle space that we can land on with something that probably feels more like cotton, probably looks more like regular underwear, but serves a little bit more as a protective function.
Yeah, I like that. How can we make it less terrible? Like that could be your mantra if you're thinking about this. One thing that we didn't say exactly that I think is important, and that, I like to rant on behaviorism. I realize there's a lot of research and I think it's lacking in a lot of ways. And so when we're thinking about like, oh, what's the function of this behavior, and like getting into the ABCs, which is antecedent, behavior, consequence, thinking about the thing that's right before the behavior itself, and the thing that's right after it. Excuse me. I think we're saying go deeper. We're saying think about this through your kid's perspective and figuring out the environment, which sometimes is related to the antecedent, but just going deeper and figuring out, what do we think is the root? Is it the sensory thing? Is it executive functioning? Are these routines too hard? Is my kid too distracted? Can I pair this with something else to help them get through it? How can we make it easier? Morgan, you were talking about the activation piece and adding something that's novel. Can we somehow make it easier? Any hacks for that?
Yes. So, looking for ways to make it easier, I often think, are there things that we can cut back on? And also remembering that behavior change takes time. So, if you are a parent of a child who is struggling to brush their teeth, I know that ideally we want our child brushing their teeth twice a day. And if we're going from not brushing our teeth really at all, if we can get to once a day or once every other day, we have to recognize and value incremental change and progress. That is actually how we maintain change over time. If it ends up being once a day, great.
Yep.
And then thinking about another way to make it as easy as we can is pairing things together. I half the time forget to take all my vitamins and things that I tell myself that I need and want in the mornings, but I never seem to forget to drink coffee. So
Oh,
so I will make sure that the vitamins are right on top of the canister that I use to make coffee. So I'm pairing those two things together and helping them both get done a little bit easier. Definitely one that I like. One that I have done with some clients in the past. This was a client's idea, and they have given me permission to share this. They were really struggling with showering and they were struggling with depression. And one of the things that they did for a period of time is that they peed in the shower. So they like got up in the morning. Almost everybody has to go to the bathroom in the morning, right?
right.
But if we tried this, and this individual stood in the shower, peed in the shower, and then was able to, to get a shower going. And that was a game changer for them.
I'm going to go on record, however dangerous it might be, and say, I love a shower pee. it's it simplifies things. I mean, neurodivergent adult just confessing, my quirks here. That works. I mean, yeah, just pee in the shower and then, you just clean it later. It's fine. It's all going in the same place.
Yeah, I brush my teeth in the shower,
That's a good
right?
hack.
Yeah, anytime that you can pair things to reduce the number of separate things that is happening, I think can be really helpful too. And then also thinking about if there's something that we can do that facilitates all of it happening. Instead of having a separate shampoo, a separate conditioner, a separate body wash, you have one thing for all of that. Or even if you can't get the full behavior, what I often refer to as approximating or getting close to the desired behavior is still progress. So if showering every day is really hard, if you can take a wet wipe and do the pits and the
Yep.
slips
The
and
pits,
like
the pits and bits.
yeah,
Yep.
right. Like then we're at least we're moving in that direction. Also, some people are going to want more option and some people are going to want less. I have some people that I work with, we have 3 different toothpastes at all times. And it's because some days one flavor is going to help you get it done. They need that novelty. They need to be able to change it up. I have other people that I work with that it is upsetting if that brand and that specific type is not available. Even little things, because you have to remember how much executive functioning is in self-care. So even little things like toothpaste that have the cap connected versus toothpastes that you have to screw off, take off, squeeze, put screw back on. That's actually multiple steps. The likelihood for some people to do the task just because of the executive functioning in the cap can feel overwhelming. And they may not be able to actually describe that to you. So it might be a little bit of trial and error.
And the sensory piece of what if you get toothpaste on the cap and then you have to touch the cap? That's a thing in our house. And now cap's just off. And I don't love that. And I let it go because I'm picking my battles and caps on toothpaste ain't one of them.
Yeah. And me, yes, I just had a sensory reaction when you were describing it. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh,
so we're acknowledging that your kids might have some sensory issues going on, and instead of trying full exposure therapy where you're just like, no, you got to do it like this. Let it go and figure out what is the goal. I mean, I think we've talked about that in other episodes. I think reducing steps. I never really thought about all of the steps involved if you got to take the cap off. Overwhelming, overwhelming.
Yeah, going back to this specific question, another thing that I'm wondering about is if wet wipes versus dry toilet paper would be helpful for this individual and might change the experience as well, because you'd have to do less wiping, probably be able to get cleaner faster. It also would be a different sensory experience. It could be a worse sensory experience for that individual, but it could be something else to try there too, because there's also a lot of steps in that. And if you have to repeatedly wipe, sometimes that's frustrating because, like, why am I not clean yet?
Right, right. I think in particular with this question as well, and your idea of making it novel, can you just take the iPad to the bathroom? This is a screen time thing. It's happening where we're hyper fixated on screens. I find being in a body annoying sometimes. And things related to self-care around my body feel so extra to me. I operate so much in my brain and in my head that sometimes this whole like thing I'm in, this case, this body, it's a lot. And so I think having those conversations with kids and being like, and this is the vessel that we are in right now. And we gotta, just like a car, it needs tune ups. I'm a fan of metaphors, in case you didn't know. But I think if you want to bring your kid into this conversation, finding more out about their experience, you might use a metaphor around how you got to take care of the vessel you're in, just like you take care of something else that they're related to. Maybe it's the iPad, maybe it's their phone or a car or their bike or things like that. But as we were talking about thinking through this particular thing, I was like, hey, I scroll when I'm on the toilet. I use that as a little me time sometimes. And it's like, can we put that into the routine for this kiddo? It's like, hey, you're home, you're going to go straight into the bathroom. Here's your iPad, watch a quick Grizzy or whatever, like short you're into. A Bluey is short in third grade. You might not be watching these things. But I think, can you, again, like Morgan was saying, pair it with something? And I mean, if you're not getting your phone out while you're on the toilet, are you really telling the truth right now? That's my question.
So true. So true. I'm going to stop myself from going off on a tangent there.
We'll be oversharing too much about our personal lives. We wouldn't do that, would we?
Oh, something that neurodivergent people have a tendency to do, and then hyperfixate.
And now it's in a podcast. Here we are. So lots of ideas here, y'all. I hope that you found some of these tips helpful. I hope they can make these battles that you can't put down a little easier. I think just remember to get to the root. Talk to your kid about it if you need to. We also want to recognize that this feels hard because it is hard. And there's so many layers. It goes beyond the ABCs of behavior. If you're familiar with that, we got to dig in deeper. Your stress, your sadness, your exhaustion, whatever you're feeling around these battles, that's okay. We can't walk away from every battle. We understand that. We want to validate you in knowing that even with these tips, even with these ideas, it's probably still going to feel difficult. And that is just a real reality for a lot of us. We're hoping that you can find some little tweaks and slowly make things a little easier. Remember what Morgan said around incremental changes. If you're expecting, you put in some kind of change and then you're expecting it to change the behavior immediately, you need to adjust your expectations because that's not usually how it happens. So I think align your expectations and don't let perfection be the enemy of progress when it comes to making these tweaks.
If you are looking for more support around any of these types of parenting struggles, Breann actually has an amazing private Facebook group where you can go and get support from other parents of neurodivergent kids who get the kind of like unique and layered struggles that come with this type of parenting. To join, just search the 2E Collective on Facebook, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you as well.
Yeah, thanks for that, Morgan. And also, thanks for listening. We'll have another new episode out next Tuesday morning. It's going to be all about masking. We've talked about masking a lot in our episode on life as a neurodivergent adult, and many of you reached out with some great follow-up questions about masking, so we're going to tackle those next week.
Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.
If you're a good fit, please join our community. We'd love to have you. You can find us over on Instagram. Dr. Morgan is at Dr. Morgan Beidelman, and Breann, that's me, is at It's Breann Colpitts. As always, if you got a question or a topic you want us to cover, send us a note. You can always message us on Instagram. The DMs are open, or use the Google form in the show notes. And lastly, if our podcast is resonating with you, we would be forever grateful if you clicked the 5-star rating, sent it to a friend. It really does help us with those algorithms and coming up in searches. We appreciate you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.
I love me a good bucket.
You love
Like,
a bucket, girl.
I do. I even have this own like personal value system that has buckets, and then I color code my calendar to
Mm.
the different ones so that I can see that I'm living in purpose.
Never change. Is that a monstera behind you?
Yes.
Nice.
Thank you. I hyper fixated and bought like 9 plants this week. Just a quick disclosure, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute a psychological client relationship and should not be used in place of expert evaluation or therapy.